Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Talking Reds. My name is Mo Stewart. Alongside me, once again, is Rob Gutmann. Glad that this is looking like we're coming back for good now, like the Take That song. First of all, before we get any further, we're going to discuss the two games, the one we just had and the one that's coming up. But I want to ask you, Rob, are you okay? Because the last time I heard you was on that AFQ after the Fulham game, and you were very much not okay.
Was I on that?
Yeah.
Fucking hell. I'd had a few wines. I can't lie. My memories of that evening are hazy. And no, I was very much not okay. Yeah, that was a low ebb, really, in my Liverpool supporting life for me personally. But it is I'm not going to say I would support the words I sort of put out around that evening where I was emotional, to put it mildly, and you're frustrated and you lash out in all directions. But I am surprised that not as many were as aerated as I was. This is unprecedented I've had a long Liverpool sporting lifetime, and I've watched some fairly shitty Liverpool sides. But the Liverpool side I've watched over the last 3 months, apart from the odd game, has been fucking awful. I mean, it's been one of the worst of my lifetimes. And I think to not be outraged about that is slightly strange.
I think it's more just a case of not wanting to untether that rage in the way that you so spectacularly love to do. And to be fair, you say that you're surprised no one else is that level. You're normally the first to go, to be fair, in this situation. If I'm looking for someone to potentially say, I've had enough of this, we need to change the whole picture, then you're normally first on my list, I'd say.
I'm not historically, Mo. I'm a guy who's pretty much been patient with Liverpool regimes down the years. I really have been. I've not been the first to go sack the board, sack the manager, change the whole team. I've not been that guy. No, I will get very emotional in the moment after a game. I'll give that.
Like that's more what I'm talking about. The kind of Rob versus the world chats. I mean, I seem to remember. I'm not going to go back through all of your past hits, but I remember there have been a few, and they're probably all still in the archives there. If you can be bothered to start digging them out. But anyway, let's talk about more positive things because we are in the wake of a win. The last time I was talking Reds, with Neil was talking to my very good friend Chris Williams from the European show. For those of you who listen, and he was talking up Leipzig's chances, saying that it should be a Liverpool win, but it's going to be close. But it never really was close, Rob. We were able, despite our misfiring up front in the early parts of the game, we were able to hold them off with ease, I would say.
Yeah, it was a really good performance. And it was sort of in weirdly character. Liverpool play in two parallel universes at the moment. The ones where they're technically at home and the ones where they're effectively away. You know what I mean? And away from home, we've won 5 of our last 6, I think I'm right in saying. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the nature of the performances, those wins would include 2 over Leipzig. I'm going to count as aways because they haven't been at Anfield. The Tottenham win, the West Ham win, and the Sheffield United win. Every man jack of them, actually, I think, by 2-goal margin. Quietly, and every one of them quietly very convincing. And the other night was no exception. Liverpool were really, really good. I mean, to the extent that I am now so, I may be very upset after the Fulham game and in other recent defeats, but I very much regained my mojo mo, and I'm ready. I'm ready to go again. I can believe in all sorts of things are possible. Look, football's about confidence hugely and momentum, and Liverpool are 3 straight. I've been saying this now for 3 straight months, but we are 3 straight wins away from rehabilitation. Unfortunately, they just don't seem to be coming. So the only thing about a win in a Champions League, which is great about it, is you get to have a little bit of breathing space and enjoy the fact that you might just win this dream, fantasize for a good few weeks until it goes again. That makes me happier.
That's been enough to sustain us in many seasons past, don't you forget? So I think that's fair enough. I mean, the game itself, obviously, I mentioned all of the chances that went all right. Eventually, we did take them. We kind of took 2 in one go, pretty much. But I want to talk about the other end of the pitch. And when we did this last week, we spoke about the potential of a burgeoning partnership at centre-half between Nat Phillips and Ozan Kabak. And, well, I think we can see those shoots beginning to grow a little bit. I mean, Nat took all of the plaudits, obviously. He literally headed everything that was in his orbit. But I think the two of them together look like they've got a plan now. And that was what it was really missing, I think, that kind of defensive solidity.
Yeah, I'm right in saying that the only other game they started was the one we were discussing last time, which was Sheffield away, wasn't it? So they have a fairly solid record of played 2 together, conceded zilch. That is, and you know what? If you watch Sheffield United, maybe not is not as much evidence in support because we dominated the game from start to finish. Whereas Leipzig, we came under pressure, as you'd expect at times. They were very, very good, the pair of them. There's not a single rick. I mean, obviously, Nat Phillips doesn't look like the most naturally mobile centre-half, and you think if the space in behind, he doesn't turn round quickly and run after his man very quickly. But that, and it's not an insignificant flaw aside, he's brilliant at everything else. I mean, really, really good at it. His concentration levels are incredible. And I don't want to start the biggest debate ever, but I'm going to risk it a bit by saying, you know what? Degsy Lovren or Nat Phillips on Wednesday night. I don't think, if you knowing the quality of concentration performance, I don't think I'd have swapped one for the other. I thought it was a high level performance by Nat Phillips.
I think it was very much a Degsy performance as well, because when he's at his best, he is that front foot defender. He is, They shall not pass. I will intercept it, even if I'm intercepting it halfway into their half. I'm going to stop the ball coming beyond me. And because the defenders know that, because he's so reliably reckless, if you could call it that, everyone else cuts their cloth accordingly. And I think that was kind of the situation with Phillips. Between them, they'd obviously said, look, I'm best at attacking the ball. I'm going to attack the ball. There were times where he attacked it so vigorously, he fell over. And so there's a big hole. So if they collect his header and put it directly behind him, then there's a problem. But that never materialized. And I think we can't really talk about the solidity they had without talking about the fellow who's playing in front of him. Well, one of them in particular, and that's Fabinho. Something, again, that we went on about last week was the debate between Fabinho in defence and Fabinho in midfield. Well, I think the man himself has pretty much ended that argument, hasn't he?
Yeah, he was sensational, wasn't he? I mean, it's fortunate for us he came back in such form, because he's had an interesting Liverpool career, really, if you think about it. We often talk about as though he's always been imperious in that position. He hasn't always been imperious. No. It took him a while to get going, and then, but once he did, he suddenly went to an incredibly high level very quickly once he found his groove. But then I remember last season when he got injured, actually, people forget this, a crucial stage in the first third phase of the title race. He gets injured with that 8-week injury, I think it was. And we're all fretting a bit. And then Jordan Henderson steps in and does his job. Arguably I would say better, but our run of results is incredible with Jordan in that position. And funny enough, when Fab comes back in, I felt he needed a few games to readjust before we began to see him at his best again. So for him to slot straight back in and put that level of performance in was a real bonus. I think it shows, I think you can cope with maybe Jordan Henderson in that position, but we haven't really had that as a replacement when Fabinho's not been there, because Hendo's had to do other jobs because of people being missing. We've always told ourselves Ginny can play the position. I think he can play all midfield positions to a high level, but I'm not sure. I think that position is a touch more specialist than he can do, for my money.
And I think the difference between being able to do it and excelling at it, I think those are the differences you're beginning to see, and the knock-on effect it has with everyone else. Obviously, I think Thiago had one of his best games alongside him, and you could start to see the confidence flowing through. Obviously, the link up between Diogo Jota and the front three, once they started to get their legs under them, you could see the goals themselves came from those links. And these are the shoots of recovery that we can hopefully cling to go to Molineux on Monday night and say, okay, well, we're not at Anfield again, which is, again, a bonus. It's another big pitch, which I'm convinced is making a difference to these things. Because if you look at all those away grounds, they've all been rather large pitches, gives us a bit more space to work in. So once again, if we have the opportunity to maybe win this game and maybe not get your 3 in a row, but go into this extended break with a bit more confidence.
Yeah, I mean, from the way it looked on the telly, one of the aspects of Leipzig was we did seem to be defending deeper. I know you naturally will when you've got an opponent who really wants to run at you. And there's no accident. We're winning away because we've got teams who are not as low blocky. Even though we played like Spurs and West Ham, weren't exactly hugely offensive when we played them. But generally, teams aren't as deep on their own turf. So I think we have to think about that high line. We really have to think about it, and we default to it obviously at home. it basically gives the opponent an easy decision to make. Well, if you're going to squeeze us back, then we will sit deep, and we know what your weakness is. By the way, we can hit you on that high line where your defenders don't turn around that well and can be run at. So I think we have to start routinely dropping 10 or 15 and inviting teams on a bit, sacrificing a bit of possession and giving our front players some space to work in.
I think that's right as well. I think one of the hardest things during this period of time is to be able to take stock, to be able to take the time to put these things in place, because there's always been another game, another injury, another reshuffle. Whereas having this break might give us a chance to do those things. So it might be that we start to see some of them against Wolves. I'm like you. I think there is a time for pragmatism, and I feel like both in the coaching room and in the boardroom, Liverpool have been a little bit hesitant to grab it. They like their long-term plan. The long-term plan has worked very well, so they really have been hesitant to let go of it at times. Whereas I think this is another one of those times where we think maybe that has to be the case now.
Yeah, I do. At the end of the day, it's got that bad in the league that sort of you've got to try anything. I was initially surprised, for example, when the team was announced against Leipzig, that he'd actually gone with Kabak and Phillips, for example. It seemed intensely risky, really. In a game where we had control of the tie with a scoreline, you'd have thought he would have been rightly conservative, kept Fab at the back, kept that bit of experience, and just kept that solidity in the key position, in a sense. So I thought putting those two boys there, it was ballsy by the manager. Obviously, the way the game plays out and you see Fabinho's level of performance, it looks more like a no-brainer by the end of it. But then you sort of think, well, why didn't we do it earlier then? But I think it plays into the fact that I think Klopp realised we were in that proverbial last chance saloon here. Really, there was getting to a phase where there was nothing to be lost. Liverpool were capable of have shown they're capable of losing a match from anywhere over the last couple of months. I mean, we've been truly, truly apocalyptically dreadful. So no change represents a risk. It actually represents a chance to believe that there's another way. And I think, however well Fabinho played, I think it's just as important that we buy into something of the myth of how well he played. You know what I mean? We have to believe that this is the turning point. We need a turning point moment. So let's call it this one.
I think so as well. And I think as well, something that we don't have privy to, but I wonder whether it makes a difference, is the feelings of the players themselves. I'm sure Fabinho enjoyed himself a lot more in midfield than he did playing centre half. I'm sure also in terms of the team, the idea of being able to say, no, we can trust these defenders to do the defending and the midfielders to do the midfielding, and we'll be okay. And be able to permeate that feeling throughout the squad, that brings everyone's confidence back. Because it's not just about confidence in themselves, it's confidence in everyone around them that I think we need to rebuild. And hopefully that'll be the start of it. Now, you mentioned dropping a little bit deeper. Wolves do have the kind of pacey forwards that Leipzig probably didn't have until Kluivert came on to maybe take advantage if we don't do it. How do you see the game? I mean, how have you assessed Wolves this season? Obviously, they're not been at the heights they've been in previous years, but they're still a dangerous team.
I've not watched them maybe as much this year as last year. I've not watched as much football because Liverpool lose, and football therefore depresses me when it happens. But when I see them, they still look a handful of a side. I can see them not getting you watch the game and go, they quietly don't get the results, right? Whereas last season, perhaps they quietly did. So there's maybe some parallels with us, actually. But I still think they look a handful of a side. I mean, obviously, the closest I saw them was I was actually lucky enough to be one of the few at Anfield when we beat them 4-0, one of the 2000. And they did seem easier to break down than you'd thought in the past. But yes, they haven't got Jimenez, they've got Traore, haven't they? And Neto's playing very well. But Leipzig had some threat as well, I'd say. Who's the guy on the left flank? He was a
Nkunku.
Yeah, I mean, he carried a bit of threat in that sense.
The fact that he's played up front sometimes this season, and the fact that they had him at left wing back shows that they were literally going for it. I think they didn't. That kind of got missed a little bit in some of their tactics.
Yeah, so I mean, you tell me about Wolves. Really, I mean, what have their recent results been like? I mean, I know they're mired compared to last season. Their points totals much less.
I would say they've kind of steadied the ship a little bit. They did look like they were another one of those teams who really didn't look like scoring for long periods of time. But they have been able to maintain or regain the solidity defensively, the discipline. They still play the same way pretty much with new pieces involved. Traore he hasn't got a stat padding assist or goal, but he's been the threat in a lot of games along with Pedro Neto. So they're the kind of team that can wait for us to do something stupid. And considering how the past few months have been, the chances of that happening has increased. So the chances of that being their tactic, I think, will also increase. But obviously, everything that we've said about our positive improvements mean that might not be the case. And on top of that, there is one member of our squad in particular who's going to be looking to make an impression, fans or no fans, and that would be the returning Diogo Jota.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd be nice for him to sort of get going again with that goal-scoring run as well, wouldn't it? I mean, I thought he's been out a long time, so patience is the watchword. But I was impressed by him the other night. Actually, do you know what? Watching it back again, it's not an exaggeration, I think, to say he could have come off that pitch with 4 goals, which is now there's no wretched finishes from him, but the fact that he's in the, I mean, I don't want to make it yay Jota, boo Bobby Firmino, but Bobby does not get himself into these positions anymore. Jota got himself into 4 times. I mean, the only one that I'd say feels like a bad miss is the one just on the stroke of half time where he could have slid it in. I don't know if it had been offside or Salah had handled it just before, but anyway. But he gets his way through several times, and he could have scored a lot of goals. I wonder with Wolves if the lack of crowd is going to hamper them in the way it's been hampering us at home. I felt I've been to the away games the last 3 years. I think it was 2 or 3 years they've been up. I can't remember, but there's always been periods in the game where we've come under intense pressure from them, very much stimulated by their crowd.
Yeah.
Where they have this power play phase and the crowd get going and you think, Jesus Christ, we've got to weather. This is a storm you've got to weather against these boys. I don't know if they've got that in them without a crowd. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they'll probably still crank up all the weird gold fire and all of the techno house pumping out. But yeah, you're right. In an empty stadium, it might be a little bit easier to deal with. But yeah, I'm like you. I'm expecting has been a tough word to use around Liverpool recently, but I'm hopeful that we can see the shoots from the midweek game continue to grow and we can get a good result and see ourselves into this break with a bit more of a plan. Now, it's admin time. Hopefully, those of you who are watching this today will have seen the latest edition of the game, which is coming out over the course of the next 24 hours or so, in which my fantasy football show. I'm not going to ask you to dive in on this one, Rob. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. We've also had the Alan Green Cup of Tea come out recently, which has got a lot of great reception. So do listen to that. Alan Green is someone who splits opinion, but he's been involved in football for a very long time. So he's always worth listening to, I think. Those are out there. So if you are looking to get involved with us and maybe you're not sure about doing a subscription, we can give you some tokens to try out before you buy if you download our app. So all of that is out there. I'm sure all the information you need to know about that is somewhere down there in the description. Now, to finish the show off, Rob, in the agenda or our WhatsApp agenda meeting, I gave you the option of giving a shout out to Bob Fagan on what would have been his 100th birthday.
Joe Fagan.
Or some transfer title. I think most people out there can guess which one you chose.
I'd like to pay homage to Joe for manager our treble winning side in '84. Very much enjoyed that. But no, let's talk transfers. Come on.
So, yes. The names that have come out recently, Chancellor Mbemba was the one that was floated around us on Twitter. I couldn't track down the source on Twitter, so I'm just going to float that out there as he played well midweek, so we're going to throw him in. The one that I want to talk to you about, Fabrizio Romano, someone whose name carries weight depending upon how much you invest in these Twitter ITK business. But he's someone who's broken a lot of big stories in the past. And he said that the situations around Ousmane Dembele and Christian Pulisic are those that are in flux. And considering these are 2 players that Liverpool previously were interested in, that may well be, particularly in Dembele's case, at a reduced price, we might be back in. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Firstly, I've just checked. The Mbembe rumour comes from that fella Tutto Mercato in Italy. Tutto Mercato Web Not the most reliable of sources. Funny enough, I watched that game. I think many of us did, the Porto Juve game in the week, and he was great.
He was great.
He was great. I know he used to play for Newcastle. He's 26. I don't know how he's rated in the broader sense. I mean, there are people who might be Juventus fans who are reading Tutu Mercato and finding themselves being linked to Nat Phillips this week. And go, did you see that guy in the week? He looks fantastic. Hope we buy Nat Phillips. So I don't know. We definitely need another centre half though. So bring on the names. But I would say the other two, well, they're both players I really wanted us to buy several times around. Ousmane Dembele is a great player. I don't know. I mean, injuries have been his thing, so he may be very welcome at Liverpool. Join our busy treatment room. Has he been injured much this season? Or is he getting his game?
I think he's been better this season. I haven't noticed any particularly long spells. He's been getting more game time as well. It's weird. They've had a bit of a rough time, Barcelona, over the course of the season, but Koeman seems to be finding his way and coming out the other side. They've only got the Copa del Rey to fight for, really, if you think about it. But they are still potentially going to win a trophy. Obviously, they've just got the new president, which is, I think, the key to this rumor, because the new president often comes in with a lot of election promises around new players, which normally means the chop for their old players. And Ousmane Dembele's contract, as it stands, runs out in 2022. Often in this situation, it might be that he would sign a one-year extension to maybe maintain his transfer value while they work out what they want to do in the summer. But with a key targeted bid at the right time, he might be available for a fraction of the price that was being touted previously.
Yeah, I think he was not a million miles off a move to Man U in the summer. It was reported when the Jadon Sancho deal wasn't coming off. They very much looked, I think, getting him on loan. And all the talk was around that the player really seems to fancy life in Barcelona, is the impression I get, and would like to make a go of it in Barcelona. But it might be moving out of his hands, as you suggest. They have no money, as been widely reported. And he's somebody who they would still get some money for. I don't know what his fee would be or what would tempt them at this point. I mean, no one's going to have big money, but you wonder, is he a player they'd let go for as low as 40 million plus add-ons? It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. And if he completes the season having been relatively injury-free, we know Klopp likes him a lot. I think it could tempt. I think it might tempt a couple of others as well, but there is a connection there between the two. So that's an interesting one. The other one, again, I think Klopp's had a relationship with, because I think Liverpool were talking about him for a while, is Christian Pulisic. Now, I think that boy's got an incredibly high ceiling. Chelsea have got an abundance of riches, really. So it might be causing a distortion in our perceptions of where he fits in. But Tuchel's not a stupid man. He surely doesn't let Pulisic go cheaply or lightly, I would have thought. So I can't see him being allowed to leave Chelsea. Dembele maybe.
With Pulisic, it would require a lot more unsettlements from both player and coach. I do think it also would require a heftier bid. So that's more of a watcher space. But Dembele, well, look, I said it in the WhatsApp group message, it's the link that never dies. And he always seems to come back around. And probably until he signs for someone else, and maybe even after that, will be being linked with Ousmane Dembele, and we'll be asking you about it, Rob. So don't worry, we've all got you covered there. Now, I think that's just about enough of your Friday that we will be taking up this week. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank you, Rob, for being so Robness this week, and I want to thank Liverpool for playing well and hopefully playing well again.